was not good. Hello and welcome back to one of my new book reviews. I do have a couple of terrible book reviews that will be coming out shortly. I have recorded them, I just need to edit them. In the meantime, I received an email from Tracy Ann Miller requesting a book review, and this is the first time I've been contacted by an author, so I was, flattered and very excited. She had a link to her Amazon page, and I was able to download it for free. And she also offered me a free copy if that promotion had ended. Basically, free book in exchange for a review. And so I wanted to get on it, right away. I think she sent it on Friday, and today is a Monday, so I tried to get it done as quickly as I could. Some details about the book before we get into the review. Pardon me while I get my notes. I always have to take notes for these because there's just so many details in so many books. Okay, so like I said, the author is Tracy Ann Miller. I believe this is her first published novel. Although looking at her blog, she has been writing for 20 years and she's tried to get published before, and she does have a second book planned to be coming out. It was published by Tracy Miller Designs, which is her own business, so I consider this self-published. It is a historical romance novel. It is set in 1895 England, so it's sort of a Viking kind of an era historical romance. The main characters are Lyrica and Slade the Stoneheart. So before I get into this review, I want to preface something because the review is negative, and I want to because this is self-published and because the author contacted me herself, I want to sort of give everyone sort of my qualifications to review things and give constructive criticism, because who am I to say these things? I am also attempting to get published. I have written 3 novels. The first one was awful. The second one I attempted to get published, and ultimately it was not quite up to snuff, and I am in the process of rewriting it, but like completely from scratch. And then the third novel was supposed to be the sequel to the second one that I wrote, and I never got to the editing stage of it. I finished it, but since I was going in a completely new direction, I changed that. And so I am not a stranger to writing. I have been writing since I was 9 years old, and I've written some novels, and I have gone through the, attempting to get traditionally published. So I do understand where authors are coming from when they're going through self-publishing and when they're writing. I'm also extremely well read. I don't just read romance novels. I read a lot of regular novels. Song of Ice and Fire books. I've read, the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. I'm very well read. And so this is why, I want to give my qualifications up front and to say that, I'm not just some random person who's reviewing this, but it is just one person's opinion. So keep that in mind when you're watching my videos. I am a lot harsher on things that have been traditionally published because they actually have a rigorous vetting process they have to go through. So I'm going to try to be not any less strict with self-published novels, but I want to be more helpful. So getting into this novel, first the premise. The premise is fairly simple. Lyrica is a weaver. She works as a weaver, and she is living with her aunt and her brother. Her brother gets into trouble and is always getting into trouble, and she winds up kind of being sold to a slaver to pay his debts. And then she gets away, but she's sort of shipwrecked, and is pulled from the water right near the coast of England by Slade, who is the other protagonist. And Slade is the leader kind of his clan or his, group under the auspices of King Albert to keep the Danes from, attacking England, because there's already a big Danish settlement on England, and they're trying to, Saxons are fighting the Danes, and so Slade is in charge of keeping the Danes at bay. And so that's supposed to be conflict. She's a Viking woman, and she's a Dane, and he's a Saxon, and that's supposed to be a conflict. And then the main kind of a conflict is that they want to attack this Dane warlord named Haston. Apparently, he is an actual historical figure. That is what the author said in her little about the book. I didn't want to look it up. I'm just gonna take her word for it. I'm assuming he's an actual historical figure. He, terrorized the Saxons for a bit and then disappeared. And they're going to stop him. And that's kind of the basis of the novel. I actually wrote out my critique because unfortunately there's only one good thing about the novel, and there's a lot of things that needed to be done. Unfortunately, this novel is not salvageable as it is. It would need a complete rewrite, and that is why I'm going to be going through it, because I know the author is going to be watching this, and I want to be as helpful as I can. So the one good thing that I can say about this is you can tell that it was well researched. The time period, the clothing, the setting, different buildings, what everything's called, and kind of different political type stuff, that seems to be well researched, which is nice, but it is also a negative, and I will get into that in a little bit. I apologize, this review is going to be a lot longer than my other ones, because I have several notes I made for the critique. So going over my points, the first one, unfortunately, is actually not even about the content of the novel. It's actually about the cover. I looked at her blog, and she worked on this cover, and she made it herself. It looks like it is from the 70s, and that is not something you want when you are self-publishing. In this day and age, people are going to completely overlook it. They're going to think, oh, maybe this is an old title that got republished, or they're going to think this looks really bad. I'm not going to even click on it. It is not an appealing cover. It is extremely dated. And just because it's a historical romance novel doesn't mean you have to have a dated cover. Actually, the opposite. If you look at modern historical romance novels, they have modern covers. The ladies might be dressed, in gowns or something, but the guys are usually, shirtless or something. And sometimes even the ladies, they're like disheveled. And so it's modern. You're trying to get people to look at it. The cover is the first thing they see, and the cover is unfortunately really, really bad. It needs to be modern, just for people even to want to look at it, unfortunately. Because when I saw it, I was thinking, is this, a reprinting or something, until I realized, it's a self-published novel. So that is something that would need to be completely changed. I mean, the cover, as far as the composition of it goes, I don't think she did a bad job making it, but it needs to be more modern. That way more modern. Like 40 years more modern. So the next point is the characters. Neither of the characters are compelling or interesting in the least. There is very little character development. You know that Lyrica and her brother escaped from England at some point with their mother, and then their mother died, to escape basically an abusive husband, and they're trying to make sure their father never finds them. And it's to the point where Lyrica actually hides out with her aunt, and everybody thinks that it's just the brother that lives with the aunt, and that, you know, she is always making up for her brother's mistakes. Her brother's 16 and she's 20 in this, and she's always making for his mistakes. And she's a good, she makes braids, like braided, like, I guess that there'd be like accessories kind of. They get sewn onto the tunics. And I think she weaves fabric, but that's not, they don't really go into if she weaves like the fabric too, like her aunt does, or if she just weaves the braids. Um, and she is what people call a song weaver, who, you know, she sings as she does this, and she can sing intent into it, like victory in battle or love or whatnot. But I'm gonna get to that in a little bit. That's a whole nother aspect. And then Slade is I hate Slade, I really do. He is the most insecure guy, and he has no characterization other than, I want to be a man and prove to my father that I can be a man even though his father's dead. And that's it. That is literally his entire characterization. And he is so insecure that he's not sexy. It doesn't make it, you know, he says like, oh, he's very handsome, and like, you know, Lyrica finds him sexy, but that, you don't feel that. He is very insecure. You know, he the first time he kisses her is because he's like, I'm going to prove, I'm in command both to her and to his men by kissing her, by grabbing her and kissing her. And it's so insecure, and it's just not, it's not the type of trait you want in your hero. And it was just not good. And they fall in love and they have lots of sex, and you don't buy a single bit of it at all, because there's no time given to them getting to know each other. They don't get to know each other at all. They don't. She uses this mechanic where Slade is kind of two people. He's, you know, the Stoneheart during the day, but he sleepwalks at night, and he has, you know, full-fledged conversations and everything, and, you know, he professes his love for Lyrica the same night he finds her and wants to marry her and whatnot. And, you know, the love story is very forced. That was another one of my points. Yeah, I will be getting into that again at a later point in this critique. Also, the characters, obviously, there's no chemistry between them because of the lack of character development. There's no time spent developing these characters, having them get to know each other, having them really get developed even with side characters, which there are way too many of. There are way too many characters that are named and described in this book. And this book is only 246 pages long, according to the thing on Kindle. And there's way too much time dedicated to other characters that doesn't need to be. It pads the book, it slows it down, and it doesn't need to be there. Going into the section of the concept, like I said, I do think this concept is workable. I think that it could have been done properly, but that the author fell into many sort of novice writer pitfalls. And I hate to say that she's a novice writer, because she's, you know, according to her biography and everything, she's been writing for 20 years, so she has experience writing, but this still feels like a novice author, a lot of the pitfalls that happen. The main one is that it doesn't start close enough to the action. It's one of the, I mean, most common pitfalls. I've done it before. Pretty much everybody does it when you're starting out writing, and even later. You feel the need to explain things that lead up kind of to the first main event or inciting incident, thing like that, when you don't have to. You can start right at the action. she explains, you know, she actually goes through Lyrica going and finding her brother needs, you know, has basically killed a slaver in self-defense, and then the head slaver is demanding, you know, payment basically in death or in flesh, in like her. And but that has nothing to do with the main conflict, main thing. The main thing is her getting shipwrecked in England. And so there was no reason to do that whole thing. And there's also a bit where Slade is fighting off some of the Dane ships are coming, and that doesn't amount to anything other than um, Lyrica falls overboard. She was hiding in a barrel, and he saves her. Um, it didn't need to start there, or it didn't need to start at the beginning. It could have started. Me personally, I would have had her washing up on shore, not knowing where she is because she doesn't really know what's going on. And then she comes across Slade, and then certain things happen from there. They kind of figure out, you know, who she is and whatnot. It would have been a lot easier to start much closer to the event. It would have been a lot more interesting. Um, Unfortunately, the main concept of kind of the title, the Loveweaver, Songweaver thing, the whole concept is presented very clumsily. Um, the idea of it is that, again, she sings as she's weaving these braids, and then if you sew the braids into your clothing, you will be imbued with, you know, either victory in battle, good health, love, that sort of thing. At this, near the end of the book, she kind of says, like, there's no actual guarantee that this will do anything, except that it's basically shown that, you know, whatever she sings into it, it happens. And it's very haphazardly placed through the book, where it's not explained very well. It's not the limits of it, or exactly what it does are not explained. And it could be maybe this is like something that people believe, and they believe the Songweaver, you know, whatever she sings into it will happen, but it's just a myth type of thing, like, you know, just believing in it makes it true. But they don't define one way or another what it is. They don't have her saying, you know, yeah, I sing into it and it gives people hope, but it doesn't actually do anything, or yeah, I have magical powers. You know, it doesn't go into it one way or another, and so it's sort of, it kind of feels distracting actually, for the other stuff happening in the book, because you don't know exactly what the point of it is, and it doesn't really have much of a point. Supposedly, she weaves this braid for Slade, and sings a song of love, and then he falls in love with her, and I guess that's the point. But it's again not explained terribly well. Um, oh god, the biggest problem with the concept. This isn't a romance novel. It really isn't, and it's presented like it's supposed to be a romance novel. Um, there isn't any romance in it. There's lots of sex in it, and they supposedly fall in love with each other, but because of the lack of character chemistry, lack of character development, and the focus on a lot more of the story being about this assault on Haston, and of course, Lyrica's got this whole side story where she's trying to find Haston, because apparently Haston is her father, and she's trying to find her brother. Um, Too much is dedicated away from the romance. The characters haven't been well developed. The romance is forced on you right away. I mean, I think 15% into the book, he's already declaring his love for her, even though it's, you know, the sleepwalker version of him. And it's very unfortunate that the main concept of this novel is not what it is. It's not a romance novel. It tries, but it really, really isn't. And oh my goodness, it was really hard to get through it, because the romance kind of happens, and then you have this whole other thing going on, and you never really get a good idea of what the whole novel, the point of it is. You don't have an idea of what the point of it is. This next section, kind of this last section, is about the technique that was used in here. Several issues with technique also attributed to this. It's not just story points. There's also some technique issues. The prose is very purpley. And if you don't know what purpley is, it's overly descriptive, like super, overly descriptive, using, fancy words, or just, trying, using this much to describe this much throughout the entire thing. There'll be several sections. She'll explain exactly what they're doing in describing every single thing, describing, I got up from the comfy chair and pulled on the lightweight and purple whatever, and then pulled on this, and every single time, and it draws out the book. I mean, I would expect half or more of this book is just description that is completely unnecessary. It bogs down the book, it bogs it down, and it gives you way too much information. You don't need this. Actually, most romance novels actually don't describe all that much. They might give you an idea of, generally what the characters look like. They don't even typically tell you what side characters look like. They kind of might give you a brief overview. Sometimes they'll tell you kind of what they're wearing briefly. But that's about it. They don't really go into super great detail on things. And that's because you're supposed to be able to imagine it, and the whole point of the romance novel is the romance, not all these details. And I said that even though the research was a good point, it's also a bad point. It's, if you've ever read, any type of historical romance novel, usually earlier novels that authors have written, it's sort of like, here, look at all this research I did, and they're throwing it in your face. And I don't know that it was intentional, but the author uses a lot of historical terms for clothing and boats and buildings, but doesn't explain what they mean. Like, she describes this thing, a semes, C-E-M-E-S, and I think it's a dress. I'm pretty sure it's a dress, but it's never described. And she constantly says, oh, she put on this semes, and then, or this semes, or whatever, and describes the different things she's putting them on, she's wearing them, or she's making them, but never describes what they are. So you're like, so they're wearing that thing, which I have no idea what it looks like. It's a pitfall. It's a very big pitfall for authors to rely too much on historical accuracy to drive, the book, when really we need some anachronicity sometimes in order to understand it. Like, say, oh, she wore a gown called this, or oh, her gown, or oh, his shirt or pants, or whatever it is. We need that because we don't understand what this term means. And when just because you keep using it doesn't mean we're going to understand what it is. The same thing with the different boats. She'll describe the different boats by their names, but not actually what they look like. It's a big problem, and she's overly descriptive and not descriptive enough at the same time, if you know what I mean. Too many research terms used in the description that doesn't do enough. And then the sex. Oh, goodness. The sex is very clumsy. It feels juvenile. It feels like it feels very mechanical, very much like this is someone's first or second attempt at writing sex. It's not sexy at all. She does not get into the emotions behind it, which is kind of what we want in our romance novels. It's like, oh, he touched me there and it felt good. No. It's like, oh my goodness, like, oh, and the jolts and the things, and you got to describe all that and how they're feeling at the moment and how aroused they are, and oh my goodness, and just like how in the moment they are, and that doesn't happen. And it's very disjointed. It was never sexy because it was disjointed. You weren't in their heads, and it was felt very clumsy and clunky and juvenile and horrible, and there was a lot of it, but none of it was good, unfortunately. I used to write fan fiction pretty religiously when I was in high school and college, and that's how I learned how to write sex, because people told me my sex sucked. I actually got told the first time I wrote a sex scene that, like, it feels really mechanical and horrible, and so I kept working at it. I actually read romance novels and figured out how to write sex. So I feel like this is more of a from a lack of practice than anything else. And also, even if you've had sex, you gotta read on how to write it. It takes a while, and even my sex scenes are still, I can write them and they're getting so much better, but I know they're not up there. They're hard to write, they can be, but they're not good. And then there were some grammatical issues in here, a few typos, which you can forgive, especially when it's being self-published. But there was a lot of improper comma usage. There's no contractions that are used. No, like don't, won't, shouldn't, nothing like that. And I did this research when I was, because I write historical romance. That's what I write. And a bunch of articles, should you use the contractions or not? And you should, because even though it feels maybe anachronistic, it's not anachronistic enough to take you out of it, and it makes communication easier because you are a modern reader reading about this. And just because it's, historical doesn't mean it has to be completely accurate. And so when you have no contractions in there, it slows it down, and it doesn't feel natural, because that's not how we talk. And so you have this in your head and you're thinking, oh, just talk like, talk kind of like we do. And she'll use some of the older terms like yay or yeah, YEA, instead of yes. And it's like, I understand why you're doing it. I really do, but it doesn't work. You have to know what works and what doesn't. And like I said, yeah, old-timey phrases, things like that. It drags it down. It really does. It slows it down completely. So those are my critique points, and I feel like I'm being really harsh on this, and I'm not trying to be. I respect anybody who finishes a novel, because novels are hard. I've written 3 of them, and they were a pain in the butt to do. And then that's just the first part. Then you have to do editing, and editing takes forever. And a lot of times you're editing something that I edited a complete novel, like I said, that I tried to get published, and I just realized that it's not good enough. And that happens. It's a lot of work. And I was reading on her bio, she she has a full-time, well, I think it's a full-time job, like freelancing type thing, design work. She's a graphic designer, vector designer, something like that. So she has a full-time job. She works, and that's hard. And writing and working at the same time. So I have infinite amount of respect for her and for anybody else who writes. The unfortunate thing is, most of the stuff that gets written is not good. And this would not have been published traditionally at all. It would have been rejected right away. This is not at all ready to be published. It is not constructed properly. It is not a romance novel, in my opinion. There's not any enjoyment to be had from it. That's the unfortunate thing. Like, not even the sex is good, and so that makes it difficult to enjoy it. Sorry, this review is getting really long. So the number of love seen in here were approximately, most of them were sex, some of them were almost sex. There were about 6 of them, but they were so bad. The hotness rating has to be a 1 out of 10. I mean, it was the equivalent of having no sex in it, really, because there was no romance, there was no chemistry. It was so bad. And my overall rating, I hate to do this, but it is an F. It fails at being a proper novel. At least some enjoyment out of them. This, unfortunately, was not one of them. Like I said, I believe the author has probably watched this. I don't know how much she's watched of it. Again, this is not meant to be mean or, really harsh or anything. This is just my opinion. And like I said, I do have some credentials to back it up, but nothing professional. So take it as you will. And for all those of you watching, I don't know how interesting this might have been because it was really long, but this might be interesting to those of you who do self-publishing. And to those of you who are thinking of asking me to review your work, this might be an example of what you might get. I will do constructive criticism type stuff for anything self-published, even if it's good, because there are different standards between traditional and self-publishing, and so I want to do kind of different reviews. All right. um, this was long, and I apologize if I hurt anybody's feelings or anything like that. Ah, I will put a link in the description if you want to go purchase it. It is being sold for $3.99 through Kindle. I believe it's Kindle only. I don't believe there are any other online stores. If you like these kinds of reviews, want to keep seeing them, go ahead and like or comment or both. And go ahead and subscribe too. I'm going, like I said, I will be putting out videos on an average of one a week. And by average, I mean there'll probably be some weeks where I'll put out like 2 or 3 videos, and other weeks I'll put out nothing. Just depends because I can film them fairly quickly, but editing them takes a little while, and I apologize for that. And if you are an author and would like me to review your novel, you can go ahead and send me a message, or you can go click the link to my blog and send me an email that way. I always do a video review and a blog post, and I will also post reviews on any website of your choosing, as long as it's reasonable. And you can also put my reviews on your website if you like, as long as you link it back to my original stuff. Yeah, and I hope everyone has a good day, and I will see you next time. Bye.